Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Boy, do I have an amazing interview for you. I know you're absolutely going to love what my guest has to share today. But first, I want to let you know about this special offer that a previous guest has given the listeners. If you listen to episode 178, where Green Smoothie Girl Robin Openshaw came on the show and shared her amazing story of transformation and curing her depression and anxiety and helping her baby go from failure to thrive to thriving, she mentioned to all the listeners that she's giving away her book for free, her hardcover $26 book. All you have to do is pay for shipping. Please go to learntruehealth.com/vibe. That's the name of her book, Vibe, V-I-B-E. And get that for free. It's a limited time that she's doing that. She only has a few hundred copies that she's going to be basically giving away to all of the listeners. So go to learntruehealth.com/vibe. And if you want her video series, which is absolutely free for you guys, go to learntruehealth.com/reboot. It's an awesome video series on how you can reboot your energy. Really love her work. And the third link I want to make sure that you gain access to is her list of the 200 high frequency foods that nourish your body. These foods have high frequencies, high energy levels. And so when you eat them, it increases your own frequency. Go to learntruehealth.com/vibe list. That's learntruehealth.com/vibe list. Please take advantage of those before the offer expires. I definitely want to make sure that you guys get access to all that great information. Awesome. Well, have yourself a fantastic day. Enjoy this interview. I know you're going to love it, especially those who are suffering with hypothyroidism and any kind of thyroid issue. Today's episode is going to blow your mind. Please share this interview with those you love, with those who also have thyroid issues. Let's help as many people as we can to no longer be stuck in that horrific cycle of going from doctor to doctor, from drug to drug, and not truly feeling like they have true health. We can end that vicious cycle. Share this episode. Let's help as many friends as we can. Awesome. Enjoy today's show. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 189. I'm very excited to have with us today amazing podcaster and author and health coach who's going to help us to understand how we can heal our thyroid and have the best, healthiest thyroid possible. Elle Russ, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your book is the Paleo Thyroid Solution, which, you know, we've heard of paleo. I first was really introduced to paleo when I did CrossFit, and they were all like, oh, you have to eat lots of sweet potatoes and steak and bacon and vegetables, and that's it.
What a classic misconception, and also what a classic link. It's almost like a false equivalency a little bit to do CrossFit and paleo, because we can talk about that a little later, because a lot of CrossFitters either do it wrong or people understand what paleo is, and they think it is just like, oh, I'll do CrossFit 5 days a week and eat from this list. And it's so much more than that, but that's so funny.
Right? And they were like, you have to do butter. Like, you have to do lots and lots and lots of butter. It's just, or, grass-fed, of course.
I'm pro butter. I'll start off. Right?
Well, I'm not against butter, but I would say that a lot of people are sensitive to dairy, that they don't.
It does need to be eliminated if you don't know what's going on, especially with autoimmune. Like,
Right.
Dairy's not something to do, and maybe even not ghee. Like, at that point, maybe you just get rid of anything from that species.
Yeah, so you help people heal their thyroid and gain the best thyroid health possible, and using food as medicine. I just found it fascinating that you call it paleothyroid. Well, let's just jump right in and for first of all, for you to explain, why did you call it paleothyroid? And I'd love for you to also share, how did you discover this?
Yeah, so that's a good one. I discovered it on accident, and the connections on accident. And The problem is that the book that I wrote, the Paleo Thyroid Solution, is literally the book that I was looking for when I was hating it and crying all day long for over a year. I mean, just, I couldn't find what to do, not only in the process of, oh God, if I have to go on thyroid hormone, like what do I do? And then also, great, I'm better, but now all these bad things happen to me while I was in a state of disease. And so diet can only do so much. So like, now what do I do? So it was always just, and so I incorporated all of those answers into the book. And uh, it's a really complicated subject, and I'm happy to go into it. Actually, I don't want to scare people off by saying it's complicated. I want people to understand that once you get the gist of it, you don't need to know science, and you might hear things about hormones and go, "Uh-oh, I'm not into biology. I failed that course." Yes, so did I. Okay, I have a philosophy degree. So, but if you understand it theoretically, it's really simple and it makes a lot of sense. And so it's really possible for everyone to learn, and they should, because everyone listening has a thyroid gland. And if you're listening and you don't have one, it was surgically removed, or you were the 1 in a million person that was born without it, really gajillion actually. And or and if it was surgically removed, then you're taking thyroid hormones exogenously because you can't live without them. So why can't we live without a thyroid gland? Like, you will die. Okay, so why is that? It's the master gland of the body. It is in charge of the production and regulation of all of your sex hormones. It is in charge of your metabolic rate, your temperature, your heart rate, everything. So when we look at hyperthyroidism, meaning overactive, those people sometimes can't gain weight. They're pooping all the time. They have bulging eyes, sometimes an eye disease that goes along with it. It's often autoimmune caused, but they're in a hyper state, a hypermetabolic state. So they're pooping, their appetite's increased, but they're burning it. And then also at the end of the day, it becomes really inflammatory and they can have a heart attack. I mean, it's a very dangerous state. So that's like the overactive. Too warm, they're sweaty, they're clammy, they have high heart rate, high resting pulse. Then you go to hypothyroidism. You go to the, underactive or really severely inactive thyroid. And that's a state of slow everything. You're freezing. You're 96 degrees when you should be 98.6 like most humans, roughly around there. Your hair is falling out. You're in a state of accelerated aging. And it really is a Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, literally situation. And that whole thing is your thyroid gland. And if you don't have the gland, or the gland is took an extended vacation, broke up with you. If your thyroid gland broke up with you, then you need to take thyroid hormones, or you will die a slow death. And that's what hypothyroidism feels like. And that's what it is essentially. And it's a horrific epidemic, and 200 plus million people worldwide have it, and 23 plus million Americans do. And it's a complete disaster that is absolutely fixable. But the problem with it is, as I'm sure most of your listeners, know and understand, that conventional Western medicine, which is the third leading cause of death, which is hilarious and horribly darkly hilarious, because that's just not what you think of when you think of, having sort of, oh, we have the best medical care. But at the end of the day, most doctors are uninformed, and they're steeped in 40, 30-year-old protocols that are just outdated wisdom. And just as in back in the day, they're like, ooh, fat's bad for you, it clogs your arteries. No, it doesn't actually. First of all, it depends on the kind of fat. Second of all, it depends on your level of carbohydrate intake. If
Mm-hmm.
you're eating a low carbohydrate diet and a high fat in the presence of high fat, that's going to be processed because you're a fat burner, you're a fat burning beast, and that's paleo, and that's what you're doing. You are in the state of what it really truly is to be human in your DNA. And when you're not, and you're a glucose dependent sugar burner, things go wrong. So I had been following the wrong paradigm, or the classic paradigm, for a very long time. And it changed, right? Like, oh, 3 meals a day, then 3 meals and 2 snacks, then eat every 2, 3 hours, and you eat in these little amounts and these perfect ratios. And how effing stressful is that? Uh, what other species or animal or anything do you know in this world that has to eat every 2, 3 hours? It's a stressful state. It causes hypoglycemia. It's type 2 diabetic causing. All of those things happen to me. So I ended up being pre-diabetic, not type 2, but very close. So these things are all from misinformation. And at the time, what I gave myself hypothyroidism essentially when I look back. I mean, maybe I didn't, but I'm sure it contributed to it, because The lifestyle I was living was a carbohydrate dependent sugar burner who was over exercising and probably depleted in certain fats and other nutrients that I needed, and essentially starving oneself and suffering as a food addict and freaking out and thinking about food all the time. And it exerted, it took exponential willpower to be able to manage it. And I just thought, oh, well, this is what it takes to achieve this body. And people aren't just either talking about it or I'm just personally cursed and oh, well. So it wasn't until I ended up working for Mark Sisson, the best-selling author of The Primal Blueprint, about 5 years ago or so. And I honestly looked at his book and I was like, I've read every health book, like whatever, he's going to say the same stuff. I mean, I was also just kind of a downer. I was a little bit, of a downer on it. I was like, yeah, coconut oil is good for you. Yeah, I get it. And then I just kept on doing my thing, and things kind of got worse. And I was like, what's happening? So, and this was actually after it already healed with thyroid hormone. But what happened is I noticed so many different connections at that point, and the light bulb went off because people had asked me to write a book about this topic like years ago. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know that I have anything really new to add to the discussion right now. But then I got a reverse T3 problem, which is on the rise and sort of a even rarer diagnoses that doctors, fail to make or don't even understand. And so when that happened, and I went through that, I realized I had something here. And the reason I had something is that the overall arc of my story is that twice in 10 years, I battled 2 bouts of hypothyroidism. One, just sort of like your classic situation, I went on to natural desiccated thyroid, feeling great. Still didn't understand the diet and lifestyle component, but I was exercising and, thought I was eating healthy, but wasn't doing the right thing still. And then years beyond there, I had a reverse T3 problem. And so both times I solved it myself using the thyroid hormone and food and, nutrition and everything that I could, supplements, etc., that were applicable. And doctors failed me. I live in Los Angeles and I saw over the years 50 doctors or corresponded with several over email or phone. No one knew how to help me. And they either hurt me, they either failed me or they hurt me. They gave or did something that was wrong, or I got misdiagnosed at one point with Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. Now, at that time, people go, well, how could someone like make such a crazy misdiagnosis? And here's the thing. It wasn't that the doctor was making the misdiagnosis. It was that he never thought to get back to the roots of the premise of the disease to begin with, because if you took the ultrasound at that time and you're a gynecologist, you would say she has polycystic ovarian syndrome. But then the first question should be, why? Why is that happening? And nobody asked why, and neither did I. So I suffered for 2 years undiagnosed before and went through all these doctors and no one helped me. And that's when I learned that I had to step up and figure it out myself. And so I had to go through it myself. And it was a scary journey. And it was really lonely at times, but it was worthwhile because in the end, I've been able to help so many people and would love to dispel this information to doctors and healers and people who need to know more about than what they were just taught 20, 30 years ago or in classical medical training. It's not that it's wrong, it's ill-conceived because it's almost the same off paradigm as the fat's bad for you. It's like, but in all cases, is it right? You know what I mean? And so you could do that in thyroid too. Like, well, T4 is the best medication. Like, nah, so it's just, again, it's about getting rid of outdated, ill-informed, protocols from back in the day. And unfortunately, the doctors that are really on top of this stuff are doctors that you have to go outside your insurance, and it's expensive. When you're talking about going to functional MD, you're looking at a couple grand here. That's tough for people to wrap their head around, and they want to try to keep going through the insurance and through the HMOs, and you might get lucky. But for the most part, when you go to one of those doctors, you're looking for a prescription or surgery. That's it. They're not going to give you nutritional advice. They're not going to say, I went to, back in the day when I was trying to learn all this stuff and figure it out myself, I went to an old doctor and I was just suffering so badly. And he tested my thyroid incorrectly and said, your thyroid's fine. You just need to work out more and eat less. I'm like, oh, that's funny because I work out 2 hours a day and I'm eating like less than 1,200 calories. So don't effing tell me, and that's what you'll be. A lot of patients are accused of closet eating disorders or lying about what they eat. And endocrinologists happen to be the worst of those uninformed doctors in terms of their level of ego. And in my book, one of the most incredible things about it is the Q&A in the back with a functional primal doctor, paleo doc, named Dr. Gary Forsman. And you will hear directly from him, me grill him on why and how doctors are missing this. How is it? Right? Because how is it? And he details it. And you could even take that and show it to a doctor to help potentially change that if you have a doctor that's open, and there have been a lot of doctors that have been open who have read my book and are adopting some of the protocols or looking into it and starting to learn more. So, but again, far and few between, and they usually are outside the realm of normal aligned medicine. And at that point, usually people have gotten to the point where they're so bad, they really do need a functional doctor because so many things have gone wrong. And that's what happened. I had over 30 symptoms. I was a disaster. I had a fibroid and a polyp that had to be surgically removed from my uterus. I got my period every 2 weeks. My hair fell out. I had horrible acne. I went from about 100, I'm 5'2", and I went from about 110, 115 pounds to 160. Working out. I mean, it's just, it's really, you have no control over your body. It's dying. And no one needs to suffer, but people still are at the hands of doctors because they go in, the doctor gives them the pill, and it's like, well, yeah, but is the soup of what's here ready to receive this thyroid hormone? And,
Hmm.
and so there's a couple of levels here. The book is about, here's how to prevent this sucker anyway. Okay. Like, here, don't get the problem to begin, and for everyone listening, if you want to, biggest thing everyone can do in this world to prevent themselves from getting a thyroid problem is, aside from sleep and all the good stuff, and, definitely take selenium. Make sure you get selenium in your diet. And the best form is S-E-methyl L-selenocysteine. And it's like 80%, absorbable. It's the best form. Others are from yeast, etc. So some people are a little like, what? But at the end of the day, selenium, or a couple of Brazil nuts, if you have good digestion. So selenium is really important. I mean, if you like sardines, they have selenium as well. So selenium is really important. So it's a multifactored process whereby you can take or give a patient all the thyroid hormones you want, but is the body then metabolizing them correctly? And the answer is often no. And that's why I have a lot of patients who've been treated for years and they keep complaining to their doctor. They're like, well, I'm checking your levels and everything's fine. A, they're not checking the right levels. B, they're being a terrible doctor by not even factoring in symptoms and all sorts of other stuff. So you should run from such a doctor. But at the end of the day, they're not looking at a lot of cofactors. And some of those important cofactors are proper iron storage, which is ferritin, Ferritin. And ferritin really should be between 50 and 100 for men and women. And if it's below 50, you need to look at that. And even if you're at 40 and you're like, oh, well, it's fine. It's not fine. So often women, we lose more iron than you think. And especially if you're an active female, you can lose more iron than most. And if you don't have enough iron storage there, let's just put it this way, whether your own thyroid hormones are working good and pumping out correctly, they can't get to where they need to go. So you could be causing yourself a thyroid problem by having crappy iron levels. And so
Hmm.
that's an important factor. A lot of doctors don't know that. So if you have horribly low iron, and mine was 10, and that's the bottom of the range at one point. In my head, you probably would have restless legs, heavy legs, low ferritin, and hypothyroidism and adrenal issues all have some similar crossover with symptoms like brain fog and other things. But things to really notice: TMI, orgasms not being as strong if you're a female, or anything down there being different in the change of your vaginal fluid or sex drive, um, or periods and things like that if they get super heavy. Uh, but at the end of the day, there's, people can be taking thyroid hormone and they're complaining about it for years, and, even could have miscarriages. And there's people that have suffered for 10 years at the hands of a doctor. But I would just like to challenge the audience and even people who are working with patients to really not force, but really encourage your patients and yourself to step up. Someone just diagnosed you with something, you better get on it. I didn't. I trusted the guy with the degree, and guess what happened? Fail. However, turned out to be a success in the long run because obviously was able to help others and write a book about that. And every bit of my suffering, and it was about 6 years of my life total, was worth it to be able to help just one person get there faster, and not have to go through the crap that I did. And so, for example, in my book, like, no other thyroid book like shows blood work. Like, show me what it's supposed to look like, what I'm looking for, and what would be off, and what would be, like, help me help myself, right? Like, no one was telling me how to help myself, and I was like, I have to put this in here. So, there's a lot of diagnostics in there to help arm yourself, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to have this, maybe forever, maybe not. That's not the point, but you're the one dealing with this. You're going through this journey, and you're also going to be the biggest participator, whether that's patient compliance with supplements and a protocol on diet and lifestyle, or whether that's patient compliance on going through a thyroid hormone protocol. So it's really imperative that people start to learn about this, because these problems are on the rise, created partially by just a multitasking, stressful world. And the reason paleo comes into this is paleo, without getting too deep into that this very second, is really not a gimmick or a haha, that's cute, let's eat like cavemen because they seem to be pretty fit. It wasn't really that. It's about the fact that it's aligned with our DNA as humans and what is expected of us. But part of that is not just certain foods, part of that is a lifestyle. It's a way of exercising, in terms of really chilling out more than most people think or do or want to. And of course, proper sleep and all of that. But it really is about getting off this carbohydrate dependency train and really becoming fat adapted. It's getting into the preferred fuel of the human body, because paleo primal is the ultimate in adrenal management and the ultimate in blood glucose management. Those two go together, and those two also go together with thyroid, and there's your triangle. It's thyroid, adrenals, and essentially, and then also, of course, there's iron, and there's all sorts of levels, but it really is that kind of thing.
You had me at becoming a fat burning beast. I was like, okay, sign me up. Is this keto?
No, you wouldn't. Well, here's the thing. No, yes and no. In order to go keto and get into that state comfortably, you have to get fat adapted first. You don't have to, but it would be very painful and uncomfortable if you were a carbohydrate sugar burner and all of a sudden you were like, I'm going to go into ketosis. It would be really awful experience. So essentially, you want to get fat adapted first. You want to start to train, upregulate those genetics, the genes for fat burning, turning over. It takes about 21 days, a month, takes a couple weeks even just for the brain to get rid of its crack, which is glucose, and stop being dependent on it. And also, it's about becoming metabolic efficient and metabolically flexible. But the efficient part of it is this: you end up really naturally eating less food overall. And it's not necessarily about that. It becomes a really incredible intuitive journey to like what your body needs. But at the same time, as you're training your brain off of that and you're training your body, a whole new world lights up in terms of your brain and your levels of energy and everything in one's life. And then if you take it a step further and you restrict the carbohydrates even further. Now in primal paleo, we're really looking at like stay under 150 total carbs a day unless you're a bricklayer or an athlete. If you're a small woman like myself, you might need to not go over 100 a day. If you want to try to really get in fancy, then you can go down to 80 and hang there and see what that's like. If you really were going to go into ketosis, you'd have to drop to 50 or even 20 carbs a day. And let's just say this: one bunch of asparagus cooked is 20 carbs.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough, people.
Mm-hmm.
Got to choose wisely. So ketosis is no joke. And by the way, my publisher, Mark Sisson, who's the best-selling author of The Primal Blueprint, which is the same name of the podcast that I host for him weekly, he's coming out with a great book called The Keto Reset Diet in October, and you can pre-order it on Amazon. And it's worth checking out, because what he does and the way he defines it is he takes you through the 21-day process to get rid of the crap, start to affect the metabolic machinery, start to become efficient at burning this fat. If you were to go in ketosis right away and your body starts making ketones, which is an alternative fuel source, you end up like spilling them out of your body. People get leg cramps, they get like bad breath, they get bad body odors, because you haven't created the machinery to get effective to work to process those ketones efficiently. So you do want to do a process. So no, Paleo Primal is essentially not keto, but you do cycle in and out of it because it does involve intermittent fasting. So you may have moments where you are in ketosis or you're, running on ketones, but it's not keto per se. It's
Mm-hmm.
considered a high fat, moderate protein, low carb paradigm.
Wonderful.
Keto is really 50 carbs or below. Some people have to do 20 carbs in order to maintain ketosis. It's a very tough place to be, and it's something that you should not take lightly, but it is what will reverse type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say if you're on insulin, like you go and you do, but you could do it. And that's what's amazing about it is there's a way to solve that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Naturally.
It's
Naturally.
interesting. So you're saying that someone could eat like low carb, moderate protein, high fat, which is your model with intermittent fasting, and I'm sure there's more details on how to follow your paleo thyroid solution diet. But what you're saying is, between 80 and 120 grams of total, or is it net carbs or total
It's
carbs?
total carbs. So meaning you don't subtract the fiber in it to get just go with total carbs. Yeah.
And then, so what are you aiming for in terms of your wonderful healthy fats?
Well, it just depends. It depends on the person and their own tolerance. So at first, uh, if one is hypothyroid or has gained a lot of weight, they might not be very efficient, and so they might need to burn the fat from their body and off their, instead of what they're taking in. So they might need to limit it a little bit. The where people go wrong there is they go, oh, nuts, yeah, and then they eat a ton of nuts. They don't realize they've just completely overdone it with calories and fat, and you know what I mean? Because really, a serving of nuts is a shot glass. And I don't know about you, but I can't eat a shot glass of nuts. I just want to eat like handfuls, So uh, that's sort of one of those things where people will make that mistake and kind of eat too much fat. So it's not eat all the fat you want. And again, this is different for every person and every size. So for example, for my size and when I need, and depending on, let's say I lift weights or I do something that day, I might eat more protein or feel the need for that day to eat more protein, where some days I don't. And so I used to eat really high protein, and now I eat between maybe 40 and 60 grams of protein. If you were to go into ketosis, you'd want to be there or even a little bit lower. If you're a guy and you're a big dude, you can handle even up to 150. If you're like some athlete, yeah, 200 grams of protein a day. Or some 6'5" dude who's, a pro volleyball player, sure. So it really depends on the person and your weight and your size and what your goals are. But essentially, you're looking at per day, and there's some pie charts in there as to what this looks like, but essentially our ancestors really never ate more than 80 carbs a day likely. And so if you just start with the carb and you go from there, it's even okay if you overeat the fat and protein at first, because really all that, and maybe you will gain a little weight, but what's more important is getting the brain and your body unaddicted to the glucose. So if you make the mistake in the beginning and you can't find your way, and there's more details of this in the book. Anyone could, my paleo solution is very similar to anything within the paleo ancestral world. It's all the same paradigm. How I might describe it or cater it to thyroid issues would be a little bit different. So you might also need to be a little bit more religious if you are trying to overcome a disease or a sickness about the food list versus occasional dairy or occasional wine or occasional chocolate might not be right if you're battling an autoimmune disorder. How quickly do you want to get better?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's right. So there's just different levels there. And really, the level of fat that my brother can consume versus myself is just different. We all have our own level of how we process fats and metabolize things. And so it's something that you can plug in macronutrient calculator for low carb online and get an idea of what that looks like. But it's not like the old paradigm would be like 40, 30, 30 of, like protein, fat, and carbs. This is more evenly spread, maybe protein and fat, high fat, but the carbs is definitely where you have to start. It's going to be the best place for people to start to monitor and be aware of the level of carbohydrates they're consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the first place you go anyway, because you will inevitably make a mistake. I did, even though I'm a primal health coach, and I was before I went through it before I became a primal health coach, but I made all these mistakes. I overate fat, I overate protein, I overate in general, even though it was from a healthy food list. I it took me a while to find my way. And then over time, you become calorically efficient to the point where whatever once fueled you becomes then too much food. And you start to go down this train where you're like, well, this is interesting. And your body becomes so much more efficient at using, what you're giving it versus the way you're pounding it. And most people are overeating, and that is inflammation in and of itself. And you could be overeating broccoli. It wouldn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't even matter what you're overeating. So that's something to look at as well in this paradigm. But the carbs things, I mean, listen, if anyone watches TV, every single commercial for diabetes medication.
Mm. It is so sad. Like 1 in 3 people in the United States are diabetic or pre-diabetic, and so many people are walking around undiagnosed. I reversed my own type 2 diabetes, totally naturally,
Yay!
and so I know exactly. I know what people suffer from and how, and it's like you said, it's complicated, but it's not. I mean, it can get complicated, but you stick to it, baby steps, and one day you don't have diabetes. So it's so worth it. What I'm interested in.
Congratulations.
Oh,
Amazing.
thank you, and I'm passionate about people understanding that this diet that you teach people how to do it. You can heal your thyroid, but there's so many more things you can heal because it is a very nurturing way for the body to create energy. Now, what about gluconeogenesis, the process the
Hmm.
body goes through when you consume too much protein,
Protein.
or your body is so used to being carb dependent, and then all of a sudden, people go Atkins on it. Like, I think a lot of people just think paleo is very Atkinsy, and so their plate is like this giant steak and maybe once in a while sweet potato. But I think a lot of times when people go from the standard American diet to paleo, they tend to swing really, really high up into the proteins because they're not used to the thought that they need to eat so much more fat. And so, do you see that gluconeogenesis, which is a liver creating sugar out of protein, basically, do you see this as a problem?
Yes and no, it just depends because we can't necessarily quantify how much per gram of like protein turns into how much glucose because also so it will do it if and when your body needs it. It might do it if you overdo it, but I think it has a way to basically it's not something people should worry about unless well, again, if you're going crazy, okay, so if you're like eating, I mean, again, but if you're just eating like those people are like overeating meat, which they are anyway, that is less of an issue for them to make that mistake than making the carb mistake. And hopefully
Mm,
they'll learn that one. But here's the thing about that. So the benefit of gluconeogenesis is, first of all, humans, we never need to ingest a carbohydrate ever, but we cannot live without fat and protein, period.
mm-hmm,
Because our body will make it. We can store a certain amount in the muscles, liver, and everywhere, but we don't store that much, and we don't need that much, and we don't need much in the bloodstream. And if we are without food and we're searching for one, and it's been days and weeks on end, the reason we have the energy to continue on and then be able to maybe kill that animal that our ancestors, after like a week of not having food, like why weren't they passed out? How did they not? Here's why, because they were running on ketones. That's when they were in ketosis. Ketosis is not just on almost an alternative fuel source. It's almost we were mostly in ketosis likely. It was probably more of that and less of the abundant times. But we are trained to sort of overeat because we're trained in that sense of like that primal, okay, there's food, there might not be some for a while.
mm-hmm,
So there's something wired in there. We do have to adapt to a modern lifestyle and figure that out. Now, back in the day, the benefit of them in the absence of all carbohydrates, maybe during months of duration, they would, if they killed animal, they'd be good. They'd live off the fat and they could overeat protein or not, or just live off of the fat. And if they needed some glucose, I'm sure the body then went into the gluconeogenesis and converted it for them as needed. The funny thing is when we talk about ketones, and again, even though I'm not suggesting anyone go in ketosis if they have a thyroid problem, but I'm just saying on this topic, um, it's really interesting because if you look at like back, people talk about going on, oh, I did a juice cleanse for like, or I did a fast, I did a water fast for 3 days. And man, the third day I was flying high. And then my guys just get better. And I was like on fire in my mind. And I'm like, yeah, it's because you were running on ketones. And so that's why when people rave about ketosis, because it's for the brain. Here's another reason it's valuable. It's really for beneficial for Alzheimer's because Alzheimer's is really what Dr. Perlmutter, who wrote Grain Brain and Brain Maker, calls it, is like a type 3 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a really important situation. Cancer. Ketogenic diet has immense benefits for people who are going through, healing from, preventing, trying to get rid of cancer, because it's been known that a lot of cancer cells thrive on glucose. And oftentimes when they're searching for cancer in your body, they'll inject you with a glucose substance to find it so that it lights up. So that should say a lot about sugar.
Right?
It should say a lot about glucose. Now, we need some, but again, not much. Most people are just blowing it. You know what I mean? So here's the thing. Your body really doesn't know the damn difference between one regular Coca-Cola or 3 sugar slices of mango from Trader Joe's or whatever. It doesn't know the difference. They're 38 grams of carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, one might have some vitamin C in it. The other, okay, one has aspartame or whatever. Okay, sure. But at the end of the day, the carbs are carbs are carbs are carbs. And so in the same discussion of type 2 diabetes, a lot of people think that, they go, well, I'm not diabetic because they're fit. Woo, that's the worst kind of diabetic to be, skinny fat. So next time you see someone's like really hot body and you're like, oh, I wish I had her body. I don't know. Check her blood work first. You might not want it. A lot of those people are inflamed and they're pre-diabetic because the fat person, their body is really saving them by storing all of that excess away into fat cells. So they get fatter and fatter. Eventually, they may not have type 2 diabetes for a while. Eventually, though, those fat cells will give up and they will also have a problem. But you can also be skinny and fit and diabetic. And then that's even the worst because it's not going to your fat cells. It's in your bloodstream. So essentially, the bottom line is people who are fit, who have that issue, might think they're getting away with it, but they're not. So some people are like, oh, I can get away with it though. But you can't internally though. Eventually you can't. You're still tapping the pancreas every single time you eat a carb. So a lot of athletes become type 2 diabetic because they were on that old paradigm of carb up, pasta it out, carb up before the race. And now they're all getting diabetes. In fact, a very famous one is a professor named Timothy Noakes from South Africa. He's famous because he wrote the book called like The Lore of Running, and it's all about carving up and how to race in endurance, and all these triathlons. And then he got type 2 diabetes. And he had to fall on his sword. His colleagues ripped him apart, ripped him a new a-hole. And he came out and he said, we were wrong. We were wrong. I think last time I heard him being interviewed, he eats like 20, 25 carbs a day. So again, oh, I'm getting away with it. No, you're not. You're not. You eventually won't. Or get your blood tested regularly and make sure you really truly are getting away with it. So the danger lies in both places and looks can be deceiving. And that's an important thing to remember here.
Dr. Wallach in his book, Hidden Earth Forbidden Cures, he wrote that, I just read this yesterday, so it's still fresh in my mind. When they take the sweat from people and they test it for because in our sweat, it's not just water and salt, it's actually trace minerals. We're losing essential trace minerals when we sweat. And when we consume carbs, consume sugar, we lose 300 times more essential trace minerals in our sweat for 24 hours. So if you put honey on your sweet potato or your toast in the morning, jam on your toast, or you drink that Coke, or you put sugar in your coffee, for the next 24 hours your body is losing 300 times more trace minerals than it would if you ate the way you're suggesting, which is that healthy low carbs.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. I just want to touch back on poor Atkins. Because here's the thing. He got a lot of it right. Like the paradigm is pretty right. People also misguidedly thought it was a high protein diet, right? But here's where he went wrong. He didn't really differentiate between like the types and qualities of fats and meats. And he still allowed for grains and things like that. So to him, it was all about the carbs. Like it you know what I mean? And it's a totally different paradigm here. It is all about the carbs, really, at the end of the day, but it's about the actual makeup of whatever food you're eating, and certain things need to go. So you could be, quote, Atkins and still be drinking a Diet Coke or like, or not even that. You could still be eating grains, even if it were the carb load, or cheese or something, or other things regularly that you would only do occasionally if you're primal and paleo, you know? Um, and the thing is, it makes sense. And so when this happens, all of the success stories that happen are that people stop being obsessed with food and don't think about food anymore. And that was the biggest thing for me. And I just couldn't. I seriously, some days I get teary eyed because I can't even believe how grateful I am that I don't think about food all day long, because that's all I did all the time. I was totally obsessed with it because I was always hungry. I was never satiated properly. And I just really thought I was cursed. I mean, I had a time in my life I was going to go to Overeaters Anonymous. I was like, what the F am I doing wrong? And aside from hormonal stuff and thyroid stuff that can throw all of that out of whack, absolutely. You know what I mean? Sometimes no amount of any kind of paleo protocol and supplementation can reverse a thyroid problem. That's okay too. Then you can live a great life on thyroid hormone. You still need to be paleo. See what I mean though? Like it's you still then if you're going to take in the thyroid hormones, then they need to be balanced right. So here's the thing with blood glucose and adrenals. So oftentimes so if you're a sugar burner and you're listening and you're like, well, how do I know if I'm a sugar burner? That means you can't go 4 to 6 to 8, 24 hours even without food and not have a hangry mental breakdown, lapse in energy, lapse in physical, mental energy, being sleepy, any of those things. Most of our country is like, what? I'd go nuts. I could go the next 24 hours without having a bite to eat. And because I'm fat adapted, it would not be a problem at all. There'd be no suffering whatsoever.
I
I mean, there
think
might be a little like, oh, I'd like to eat, but there'd be no suffering whatsoever. I could go strong, and I have all day, all day long, and that's how it should be. Um, and so it's really interesting. So that's how you know you're a sugar burner. And when you look at that, the ups and the downs. So when you're a sugar burner and people go, oh, I can't do paleo because I'm hypoglycemia. You better go paleo if you're hypoglycemia. It's the only way you're going to reverse it is by getting fat adapted. If you're hypoglycemia, that means you really do have drops in blood sugar all the time. Here's what happens: your blood sugar drops, cortisol goes what? Blood sugar rises. Cortisol's like, hey, what? Hold on a minute. And you don't want that. You keep tapping that cortisol, you got fat around your middle. It's antagonistic to testosterone and other sex hormones. It can be then inflammatory in not a good way, not in the like, oh, I just went on a sprint, raised some cortisol, HGH. Okay, that's a good way to release hormones. Not the way of screaming at the top of your lungs to your partner every night in some horrible relationship. That's stressful. You know, being an angry person driving a trap, right? There's a million ways one could be stressed, right? But it also could be exercising too much. So hopefully that I know that's a lot. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, but that's where the adrenals and blood glucose. And so if you get fat adapted, you're even keeled. People go on this for emotional stability purposes, for mental health reasons, because it's the ultimate in blood glucose management. And this is what the standard CrossFitter doesn't understand. I can't tell you how many people have tried paleo and they just go, oh, I was suffering, I didn't work out. It's like, well, then you didn't look into it. You just looked at a food list. That's all you did. You didn't understand that it was a carb, that was this high protein, moderate fat, low paradigm. You didn't understand that you had to chill out in the exercise and you couldn't do these sugar burning workouts. You know, if you work out over 180 minus your age in terms of heart rate, so 180 minus your age, whatever that heart rate is, whenever you exercise at a rate over that, you're really in a glucose burning stage. So if you are a sugar burner, you better be a high cardio person because that's the only way you're going to survive that. And it's going to be rough and horrible, and you're going to have to be in the gym it's going to be really stressful, but it's the only way because you are going to have to burn off that sugar that you put in there. But when you're fat adapted, you exercise less. It's so much less stressful. You get to go at a chill pace. You don't have to go crazy. And you're burning fat. You're in a fat burning zone when you're training. And it's about slowing down. And then after workout, you're not even hungry. Or like, for example, I woke up, I only had a couple of cups of coffee. I didn't have any food. I went and did a workout on the track. I just did I walked the track for like 45 minutes and maybe 2 lengths. I did a little jog, but that's about it. Then I went to the gym and I did like 10, 15 minutes of just some like light weights and some abs, like whatever. And I didn't eat until like 2 p.m. Totally fine. And that's okay. There's no rules. There's no eating window. But if you're a sugar burner, you better eat after your workout because your muscles are going to start to catabolize because now you're in this adrenal cortisol antagonistic drop up and down, so unsteady. And when I was a sugar burner, I would be driving from like Hollywood to Malibu, which is really, it can take an hour, but let's say it's 45 minutes. I would be freaking out in the car. My brain would be so starving and I'd be just having like this hangry meltdown. And it was less even about me being hungry. It was more about my brain. And I remember I would have to pull over and like go to a grocery store and I couldn't even make it the next 20 minutes home. I mean, that is so messed up.
That's how Starbucks survives
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
business. You know, they're depending on the hangry people to pop in for their mocha almond pumpkin latte, whatever. What do you put in your coffee? Do you do like a bulletproof? What kind of fats
Sometimes.
do you do?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I use like I like Laird Hamilton has some coffee creamers that I like. I sometimes will put some just regular like bulletproof collagen in there. Sometimes I use the collagen my boss makes as well, which is a vanilla one. And then sometimes I'll put straight up MCT oil or coconut oil in there. And sometimes nothing. It just depends. It just really depends. It depends on if I'm going on, and I just go with intuition there. I rarely wake up hungry, and once you get fat adapted, it is a rare occurrence. You get so metabolically efficient that your brain wasn't starving the glucose out all night, so then you didn't wake up starving. Most sugar burners wake up and they're hungry as hell.
Mm.
It's another indication.
I want to
Yeah.
talk about blood tests. You said, you know, most MDs are doing it wrong. Like they'll just do the TSH thyroid blood test, which, you know, oh, that'll show up as normal, and then they'll say you're fine, and they're not testing for free T3 or free T4. What other tests? What tests should people be looking at, and what tests are totally useless that are outdated?
Well, here's the thing. It's that TSH is definitely still valid, but not on its own at all whatsoever. It is only, I don't say valid, it's only applicable in light of other tests. So here's the basic, like, you think you might have a thyroid problem and you want to get blood tested. Here's the basic, like, initial rundown everybody should do. TSH, free T3, that's free as in freedom. So free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and then 2 Hashimoto's antibodies tests. Everyone who might potentially have a thyroid problem needs to rule this one out because if it's there, you need a stricter paleo protocol, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the Hashimoto's tests are TPO, thyroid peroxidase, but it says TPO-A B for antibody. So TPO-AB, and the second one is TGAB for thyroid globulin. It's important to get both. Some people test positive for one and the other. Having high antibodies in the TG is a little worse than the other. It's very important to rule this out because if you do have Hashimoto's, then you need to absolutely 100% adopt a strict paleo protocol, especially in terms of eliminating grains, all grains, but particularly gluten, because gluten does actually ignite, and we know it triggers Hashimoto's antibodies. Why don't you want antibodies? Antibodies equal inflammation, equal begetting more issues that are autoimmune. One begets the other. It will crumble and fall. So usually people, like, for example, there's a success story in my book, and I did a podcast with her. Her name's Kara Hahn. She was mistreated by an endocrinologist for 10 years, a couple miscarriages on Synthroid, and she had Hashimoto's. No one had ever even tested her for it. She didn't even know. She ate pasta. She had no idea. So anyway, what happened with her is that she had no idea that even though she had once gotten better on thyroid hormone, she still didn't know that there was this silent thing happening in the background, because a lot of doctors don't even know that you can even treat autoimmunity. And anyone with an autoimmune condition should look into the work of Sarah Ballantyne, and who wrote a book called The Paleo Approach, or also Eileen Laird, who does a podcast called Phoenix Helix, and a lot of it's all about autoimmune stuff. And she also has a book called The Simple Guide to the AIP, which is autoimmune protocol. So if you have an autoimmune situation, you need to know right away, because then you have to immediately get strict if you want to get better. And you also have to go down the road of super elimination, like possibly eliminating things that are like red colored seasonings like paprika, nightshades. There are really weird random things that affect people and patients who have autoimmune conditions that are easily sort of identifiable through an elimination diet, but also through reading other people's works and kind of hearing what bothers other people, right? Of course, patient experience. So that's really important. So those tests are the basics. Now, if you want to go beyond those tests and can afford more, then you want to get ferritin, B12, vitamin D, 25 hydroxy test. You're going to want to get homocysteine. There's a million tests you can get. You can get a food sensitivities test. You can look at a million things, organic acids test. You can get tests up the what to look at everything. And if you can and have the wherewithal and the means, do it, because it's fascinating and it's really interesting to get to know oneself this way. But if you don't, then those are the basic tests. And anyone can contact me through my website, elleruss.com, and you don't even have to buy my book. I send everybody who's inquiring about thyroid like a whole slew of like, here's where to find a doctor. Here's the best website for thyroid. Here's a bunch of podcasts, like all in one place to get people on the right path. Because I spent $15,000 of my own money that I didn't have at the time, was a broke, struggling actor. Like it was a nightmare to keep going to these doctors and keep failing. And so I just made this sheet to kind of provide to everyone as a like, here's the launching board for you. You don't even have to buy my book. Although if you'd love to, it's cheap and easy to do. But seriously, it's really something that you're gonna need to learn about anyway. So you might as well start now.
Wonderful. Excellent. And they can get your book at ELLERUSS. That's elleruss.com. And of course, the link to everything that Elle does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast on learntruehealth.com. Definitely going to have the link to your book.
You can also get it at almost every Barnes & Noble. It's featured right now pretty prominently in all the stores. And you can also get it on Amazon as well and elsewhere.
Very cool. What do you think about Wilson's temperature syndrome? I had Dr. Wilson on the show a few months ago, and he says that people can have thyroid problems, talking about like this reverse T3 problem where it's not really showing up in the blood test, but if they test their temperature, they're consistently like 96 degrees.
Right. Well, how they define Wilson's temperature syndrome might be the difference between like an Atkins or Paleo. Like they might be the same, but there might be nuances in the way in which they present that information. So for reverse T3, for example, yes. So what happens is there's an overconversion of one thyroid hormone into an inactive one versus a biologically active one. And when that happens, if you're on thyroid hormone, or even if you're not, your blood work might look normal unless they test that reverse T3 and do the ratio between the reverse T3 and the T3. That's really what's going to indicate whether or not this person is hypothyroid despite what their labs look like. Now, anyone who gets the test that I just mentioned, you can Google reverse T3 calculator. A couple websites will come up, but Stop the Thyroid Madness has one, and you can plug in the units of measurement and the results of the reverse T3 and the free T3, which have to be taken in the same blood draw. And a ratio of 20 or higher is really considered healthy. Below that, I mean, sometimes 15 and higher can be healthy in most people, but usually it's 20 or higher. When you have a severe reverse T3 problem, it could be like 11 or lower. And that's when you know this person is seriously hypothyroid, despite the fact that a lab might show otherwise or be normal. If you're a doctor that knows what they're doing, the labs won't look normal. Something will be off about it. Something will be off about it. But that happened to me. My doctor was like, your thyroid's fine. Here's some phentermine, which is like a weight loss drug. That's a methamphetamine-based drug. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, here's phentermine to blow out your adrenals. Your thyroid's totally fine, because I was already on thyroid hormone at that time. I had the reverse T3 problem. So when I started to get the symptoms again, I didn't think hypothyroidism, right? Because I was like, how could that be? I'm on thyroid hormone. Like, that didn't make sense because no one really knew about reverse T3 then. So I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, and it didn't make any sense to her because she didn't know what she was talking about. So had she seen one test, though, when I look back, there was one test that an informed doctor would have recognized was off. That would have indicated, this person might have a reverse T3 problem. And she didn't, she missed it. And so again, I was back to the drawing board because I looked at it too and I didn't see. I said, yeah, my labs look normal. I don't know what's going on here. And then I figured out and I thought, and researched and realized I might have a reverse T3 problem, and I had a severe one.
Now, you haven't mentioned iodine. I don't think you have. Is iodine a big deal when it comes to thyroid? Or is like, I know selenium, definitely. We need selenium. And that's not many people know that selenium is so important for thyroid health. But what about iodine? And should we all be on an iodine supplement or eating foods that are high in iodine?
I think everybody should eat some type of food and iodine. And even if you can't, then like, Redmond real salt has a high iodine content in it, compared to most salts. You can just, use that or sea vegetables, something like that. It's really important, but there's a problem with it. So people will research thyroid issues. They'll see iodine come up and they'll be like, oh, I'll just start taking iodine. I see this makes sense. Aha. And you can actually really make a situation worse and you can F up your thyroid. So unless you know you have an iodine deficiency, don't intentionally go out and buy it and take it, except for the trace amounts that would be in a multivitamin or a trace minerals, you know what I mean, or salt, or get your iodine the regular way, unless you have a deficiency. And the way to really test that is to do a 24-hour loading test, where basically like you take a pill of iodine and then you basically urinate into what looks like one of those when your car breaks down, you have to go get gas from like those like containers, the
Mm-hmm.
big red containers, and you have to just sit around all day and urinate into there, and then they, based on what is displaced, will be able to tell you. And I made this mistake myself and was doing iodine, and then went and got tested. I had no iodine deficiency whatsoever. So I was, and it can also cause really high detox symptoms in people if they take it in large amounts. So yeah, just the trace amounts, just eat shellfish, eat some, and if you can't, then get it through salt,
Mm-hmm.
or foods. Yeah.
So, why is it that we have so many thyroid problems right now? And is it really that it's just ramped up in the last 30 or 50 years, or have we always had it and now we're starting to like be able to diagnose it better? And is it really the main cause the amount of carbs that people are eating, or are there other major factors that can cause thyroid issues, like we're finding the obesogens and the different receptor disrupting and hormone disrupting chemicals that are in different plastics, for example?
Absolutely. Listen, detoxify yourself. That's one way to start this train. You think you want to prevent yourself from having a thyroid problem, or you want to try to fix one naturally? Clean out the cupboard and clean out the body, and start to detox as much as you can. Even if you went and got a simple milk thistle or liver detox, combination, and just took that and did your best to eat clean for a while and detox as much as you can. There are several causes. There's several things that disrupt thyroid. So aside from autoimmune disorders that cause thyroid issues, uh, let's say you got Lyme's disease. That can affect thyroid. Let's say you are going through an extremely stressful event. That could be like you just lost your leg in a car accident, or you're going through a horrible divorce, or you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what it is. Um, any stressful event can throw thyroid off, and here's why. So your thyroid is this like amazing metabolic outputter that puts a lot of logs on the fire. It's fire. It's metabolism. It is fat burning. And so to highlight that, the main fat burning hormone T3, that's the only biologically active thyroid hormone that anyone needs to care about. That's why free T3 levels are corresponding usually with how people feel. If you were to Google Cytomel, which is the name brand for T3, or liothyronine sodium, or T3, like 100,000 bodybuilding websites pop up, and you're like, that's weird. What's this about? I'll tell you what it's about. It's because when those guys are about ready to do a competition and they need to shed as much fat as they can quickly, they will jam themselves with T3, shut their thyroids down, overtake it. Very unsafe, really dumb, not a good, not recommended, but they do it. So that says a lot about T3. It says a lot about why when you're hypo, you often get fat. When you're hyper, you're often quite skinny and can't gain weight, although that does eventually backfire because you can have an overappetite and then you're hypermetabolic and then you need more and then the blood sugar rises. And so, now you're in another dangerous scenario. The reason this happens is, so let's say you're just training for a marathon and you're not eating right. And so your body thinks you're starving and also stressed because they're like, we don't know if she's running from danger, but she's starving. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shut down this thyroid a little bit. And we're going to take this prohormone, T4, and we're going to turn it into the inactive form of T3 called reverse T3, because we want to try to save her life right now. We don't want her to burn any more fat right now because she can't get food. Furthermore, we're going to lower that sex drive and her ability to even carry a baby. We'll probably give her a miscarriage if she does get pregnant because she is in no position to have a child right now. Now, that's literally like what your body is, it's always trying to save you. So what messages are you sending it? And those messages do come in the form of exercise, lifestyle, blood glucose, and adrenals. And you can manage all of that through a high fat, moderate protein, low carb paradigm, which is how we're designed. So yes, ultimately, a bad diet, overwhelm, working out, and all that kind of stuff does lead to that. It leads to an absolute complete hormonal disrupt on top of if you're losing crappy lotions with parabens and all the other things that we know are rough for you. High mercury, heavy metals. I had that. Actually, I'm going through a detox right now. I discovered it late. I had extremely high mercury. Look, lifetime of tuna and sushi, and there you have it. That is a mitochondrial disruptor. It is a thyroid disruptor, and that can cause reverse T3 issues. So there are a lot of underlying causes, and that's why it is important to go the functional route and really look at a lot of different things. Again, you can give anyone a thyroid hormone pill. That might not even be the damn problem. Or you can give it to them temporarily, and that's great. Maybe you're starting to feel better, but maybe you need to think about cleaning up the other stuff so that pill you're taking works the right way, gets metabolized properly. So it's really your choices in life, mood, mental, physical, and diet that are guiding your thyroid at every given moment and telling it what to do. And if you want to be an optimal fat burner and even just happy and, because listen, low thyroid, depression, brain fog, I mean, it's horrible. It is horrible. And anyone with mental issues or been diagnosed with bipolar depression, thyroid should be the first thing you check. T3 is an immediate, listen, even if someone didn't have a thyroid problem, I would gather, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of scenarios, not every scenario, but I'm sure a lot of people who were depressed, who didn't have a thyroid problem. If you gave them a little T3, they would feel it. You can treat depression with T3. So that says a lot there. So again, back to the root, back to the master gland. If it's sucking, your whole story is going to suck. Your whole story. It's going to be a nightmare. It's not going to be pretty. Yeah.
You've dispelled a lot of myths. Is there any other myths that you just love to dispel around thyroid and thyroid health and how to heal the thyroid?
Yes. Well, the fact that low carb or keto is bad for thyroid or affects it negatively is completely misguided. Almost like the same comparison of the high fat back in the day causes heart disease, but they weren't looking at whether those people were eating 300 carbs a day or not. You know what I mean? So kind of one of those. But the biggest thing is, don't you listen to anyone who's going to tell you you're always going to suffer from X because you have this.
Absolutely. Now,
and don't you give up. Don't you keep persevering. If I didn't persevere, I had a family member I talk about in the book. I had a family member scream at me and be like, "You're going to have to listen to one of these doctors one of these days." And I was like, And you know what? I'm glad I didn't. Because they would have killed me. And I'm sorry I had to do it on my own and alone, but that's okay. I'm so grateful to be helping the people I am. The reward of the gratitude from people all over the world who are like, "Thank you so much for this missing link," or saving their life or something. I mean, that's all that I could have wanted for the 6 years of my life that were absolutely in misery because of this and lost because of it. So when you're hypothyroid and you're sick and you're bleeding and you're a mess and your hair is falling out, oh, that's a great time to what? Date? You're a really great friend, great employee. You're not. You're a mess. Every area of your life is a mess. You lose friends. People lose relationships. I talk about that in my book. I have letters to the significant, and think about it. You've been going to doctors for 2 years. Everyone says you're fine, and you're still hating it. And they put you on thyroid, and nothing's getting better. People start to think you're crazy, right? Your partner's like, also, she's an a-hole. She's not acting like she normally did. She turned into someone I didn't, right? How do they? If you don't know, they don't. No one knows, right? So what can you gather? They just think this is who you are. This is who you've become. And it's not who you are or who you become. You've got a thyroid problem. I mean, it really is the difference between misery and despair and general malaise and the contrast of solving hypothyroidism and being just so happy and excited and up and energetic. And, I had a friend I talk about in the book. I had a friend call me crying after I'd fixed all my thyroid problems and we knew what it was. And he called me and was kind of breaking up in tears because he said, "I just have to admit, I felt so bad. I thought you were such a party pooper. And I was so mad at you that you didn't want to ever do anything really. And you always kind of want to stay at home and you weren't any fun." And he was crying. He was like, I can't believe, and we were both crying. It was just like, we didn't know. That's a very similar story to a lot of couples or people. I know a girl in my book, Cher, she quit her job working with numbers because she couldn't remember the numbers. She started to get dumb. That's a big indication. If you start to secretly go, oh, I think I'm getting dumber, or I think I'm
Mm.
aging. And that's kind of a secret thing you don't want to admit to people because it feels like you're like, and then you kind of go, oh, well, maybe this is age. No, it's not, by the way. It's not. It's a problem. And so those are the kind of indicators too. You kind of give up on dreams. Multitasking becomes like, ugh, overwhelmed, exhausted, staring into space, can't read a paragraph without rereading it, just can't. And you become not a fun person to be around. And so this girl in my book, she quit her job before she could get fired because she figured, oh my God, if I keep going like this, what's wrong with my brain?
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing how people will just assume that it's just because they're getting older. A lot of MDs will say this is just normal. Like you'll go to an MD with pain or symptoms. Well, you're getting older. I've had people tell me they were in their 30s and their doctor said, "Well, you're getting older."
And then the next scene is like someone talking to a toddler. They're like, well, you know what? It's growing pains. Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you eat? Can you share a day besides like today, which you like didn't you had a nice
But then
fast
I did
today,
eat. But then
but
I did eat.
but then you did eat. So what share some meals. Like let give paint the picture of what it looks like on our plate.
I mean, it could be anything from a big fat steak with like butter, herbs de Provence butter and salt on there. Um, if I really want to splurge carb wise, I might have a big baked potato with all the works like bacon and butter and all that kind of stuff. Um, Sometimes, if I really want like Italian, I'll make meatballs that are grain free. I don't use breadcrumbs. I use like almond flour or coconut flour, a little combination of both, with egg to solidify them. And then I'll make like meatballs with like, meatballs in a bowl and like sauce and cheese and stuff like that, just like, or Parmesan, you know what I mean? To get that feeling if I want that. Um, I eat pretty clean, but it just really depends on the day. Some days, like lately, I was just craving fruit and I went and got a bunch of nectarines and uh, dipped it in like vanilla yogurt, whole fat yogurt, just because I felt like a treat and I was craving some kind of like sugary thing, but I didn't want junk. So it really is an intuitive thing. But I mean, every day I eat some kind of animal protein or fish of some kind. Um, I always have like pistachios and some nuts and seeds around to munch on. I love Epic bars and take them with me. And I like a lot of their products, their bites and things like that you can have on the go. And it just really depends. Sometimes I might have like a really one meal a day, but it might be like a really big meal. Like if I know I'm going to go out to dinner and some restaurant I really love and I might want to overdo it, then I might have a really long dinner where I might overdo the food on it, but it still is probably going to be, yeah, meat, veggies, and fat. But usually I just go for, um, like today, I ate a couple of leftover pork ribs that I made last night, and then I threw a bunch of arugula in a bowl with some cherry tomatoes, drizzled it with olive oil, sprinkled some Parmesan, put a little white balsamic on there, and some avocado, and just because I was craving it for some reason. It's just weird. Like one day I'll be like, I just want cucumbers right now. And sometimes when I'm like, ooh, I'm craving cake, that's when I'm like, all right, go for the fruit and whipped cream, like go do another choice. But occasionally I'll splurge. You're human, you're going to go to everyone should have brie and bread every now and then. And so I do too, of course.
But it doesn't sound like a diet in which you suffer greatly.
I don't suffer at all because I'm eating a ton of fat. That's the thing. And I'm fat adapted, and you end up becoming again calorically efficient, so you don't even need as much food to fuel you, and you don't really think about that much. But like occasionally, like there's a place on the street that makes a gluten-free mac and cheese that's amazing, and so if I really want to like, I'll go do that. But now they make paleo pasta. This company Capello's, and it's great. It's made from like almond flour and egg. So there are so many options now. Like you want granola, there's so much great paleo grain-free granola. So even if you do want to kind of splurge, at least where I live and in general, you can buy everything online now. There are so many yummy like paleo treats that even though they may be higher in carb and fat and you still have to watch it, they're just as delicious. Um, there's one company here called Gratitude Cafe, and they make these raw desserts that are like key lime pie, but it's all raw coconut and almonds, pureed nuts, And it's amazing and it's incredible. And it's like, so there's lots of new companies out there making raw or grain-free desserts and treats that when you feel that dive to go there, that's the better call than going and getting the crappy cupcakes at the store, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
once you become insulin sensitive, like so for example, it was my birthday not too long ago, and my friend gave me like a cupcake from this place called Sprinkles. And I, even though I don't usually eat grains, but like whatever, I'm not celiac, it's fine. And I just like the top anyway with the icing, you know. So I ate that and I was passed out an hour later. Couldn't even stay awake, could barely keep my eyes open because I'm so fat adapted that you do something like that and it feels awful. It feels like you're a heroin addict in a drug den at that point because you're like, I can't move. Like you're just nodding out. It's awful. And but when you're on that train, that's not how that works. It does work like that when you're in the drops. That's how you know when you're in the drops, right? That's what it feels like. And that's when you're like, oh my God, I need something to eat. And then you get picked up again, then you get dropped. You don't want to keep doing that. Um, so in general, like when I do go off the rails, I always get kicked in the ass on that. And it reminds me, and I don't want to do it again the next day. Whereas before, when I was a sugar burner and a sugar addict, I would do it the next day. And that's why I couldn't eat that one cupcake because then I would go back the next day and have the next cupcake and probably do it for a few days until I have to like willpower myself out of it. But now it's the opposite. Eat the cupcake and I just murdered myself for hours and it just felt awful. So then you just, your body's like, no thanks. I never thought I would say that because I love icing and cakes and cupcakes. It's my jam. Like if I had to choose one thing in the world, that would be it. But if you put one in front of me right now, I literally wouldn't eat it. I never thought I would be able to even say that.
When you feel so good, when you figure out, when you dial in the right diet for you and you feel so good, and you know what it feels, you finally know what it feels like to be the difference, to be feel so bad. Like people are walking around sick, they don't know, they don't have a comparison, they don't remember
Right.
vividly what it feels like to be so healthy. And so when they finally do dial in this diet that really is just perfect for every cell in their body, and then they kind of forget. It's so easy to forget how the difference because it happens slowly, right? It's like ice melting. You go on, this really healthy paleo diet and you dial in your macros and your nutrients and everything and you figure out what your body's sensitive to and you stop eating that. And then one day it's like your birthday and all of a sudden you're like, well, whatever. Like you said, I'm not celiac. I can do it. I'm not going to have anaphylactic shock. I can do it. And then it hits you. You're like, I remember what it used to feel like every day of my life before I
Right.
found the right diet. And it's pretty crazy. Such a huge difference. I was living on the dollar menu. I mean, it feels like yesterday, but it was years and years ago. And I can think back to how bad I felt all the time. I felt like I was a prisoner in my body. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like I was inside my head clawing the wall. It was like
Yeah.
the mental and emotional mood swings were just the ups and the downs. And
It's an addiction, right? You are no
yeah.
different than any other addict other than it's highly functional. You can still function in the world, right? You may not lose the house when you're a sugar addict. But here's the thing. I can tell you, it doesn't matter how fat you get. You could be 400 pounds and trapped that way, or you could be just 50 pounds over whatever you are. The world of being a food addict, like you're talking about, it is just one of the most painful, loneliest, awful places to be. And it feels bad because you keep doing it yourself. But the problem is that we often don't know the way out. And you try all these things and you read online, and they're still, again, not fixing the carbohydrate dependency. So you won't win. You won't win on the zone. You won't win on the eating every 2, 3 hours. You won't win. You'll have to exercise a lot of willpower to stay there. That sucks. Willpower sucks. When you
Mm.
go paleo primal, you need willpower for 1 month. That's it. You need willpower for 1 month. And you know what? You wouldn't even have to go work out. You don't even have to get off the couch. Swear to God, if you could just the willpower with the food for 1 month, you're set. You've detrained your brain. Usually 21 days, but it might take a month for some people. You get past sort of like this issue of like, oh my God, I'm tired, because that can happen for the first couple of weeks as your, brain is starving itself of that drug. And then it's a whole new world. And that's the day when I had that day. I was like, it was 5 p.m. and I was about to go to something in Hollywood, and I looked at my watch and I was like, oh, I should probably eat. And then I was like, should I? I'm not hungry. And then I'm like, why am I not hungry? I haven't eaten all day. And it was the first day after I had like gone paleo primal. And the fact that I had forgotten and hadn't even thought about it and then still was like, I'm not hungry, that was like, what is happening? That is freedom. That is
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate freedom to not think about it. I mean, I literally understand that prison. And again, it doesn't matter if you're 400 pounds and you're in the prison. It might be a worse prison, but it's the same prison. It's horrible. And I liken it to also smoking in a lot of ways. So I used to be addicted to cigarettes. And when you're thinking about when you're a sugar addict or when you're like a cigarette addict, it's almost like this. This is a weird thing, but people listening will understand this, and you might too. You can't even imagine a day when you are going to be at a point where you don't want it, and you almost don't want to get to a point where you don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sick, weird effing thing. You know what I'm saying? It's this weird thing because you're like, but I don't even want to know what it's like to not want. It's such a crutch that it goes there. It goes to that dark level of that's scary. And that's something you're like, I don't know. And I'm telling you now, because I haven't had a cigarette in many years, that it does happen and it is amazing. And you really are like, oh my God, I can't believe I once was like even resistant to even that. Right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it goes beyond actually like whether you're going to quit smoking or not. It goes into what that mental picture is, that assessment I just gave you of the internal thinking. That is a true addiction. And sugar and food and the way you eat is no different. It's the same thing with this sugar game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know what I mean? And can cause equally horrible problems.
Yeah, so many
So
people are scared to go to try this paleo, try grain free, try low carb, try no added sugar in their life. They're so afraid. They're like, well, what am I going to put in my coffee? I have to have my coffee and they, and what am I going to eat? I can't eat bread. What am I going to eat? I know so many people have defended their diet. Oh, I can't do that. I eat too much rice or I eat too much bread or I eat too much pasta or I love my margaritas or whatever it is. And or I love my lattes. And it's just like they put this brick wall up in their mind and they stop the possibility instead of going, well, okay, how could I have, if I went sugar free, how could I have my coffee in a way that still satisfied me? So find a stevia that tastes good to you because every brand of stevia tastes different. What can I make
try some heavy cream in there.
yeah,
And maybe that makes it milky and something that don't need the sugar.
right.
Put a little cinnamon in there with the cream and I mean, there's so many things to do. But aside from what you're talking about are objections and they're cop outs. And I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this in my book because I had a friend who was like, yeah, well, but by the way, we later found out she had Hashimoto's. So I was
Oh,
like, well,
wow.
now you have to quit grains. But she was like, well, but I love that like lasagna I make, at the holidays. I make this like that my family lasagna. And I was like, so eat your damn family lasagna. Look, don't stop yourself. You make a blueberry pie every year that's in your family. Are you eating it every week? Come on, people, stop making excuses. And the person that's right up with the objections, I'll just look at and go, then guess what? We're not going to continue this conversation. That's a non-versation. How do you feel great? Great. If you don't, fine. But like, you know what I mean? Okay, then I guess then you should set it right there. I mean, that's not, especially to people that I know really well in my life who are, making these excuses. Clearly, I'm not going to be that. I might be that brutal with a stranger, but it really is. It's like, you know what? Here's the thing. My boss said it before, and I like it. He said, "Look, I can't convince you that your life sucks, and the only reason that got me to quit smoking is that my life sucked, and here's how it sucked. I didn't have ill health because of the cigarettes necessarily. It was that I had a fear of lung cancer." I felt awful and out of integrity with the fact that I'd work out every day and drink a green drink and then light up a cigarette after a hike. I knew it. And I was in this contradictory out of integrity phase of knowing I was killing myself and feeling bad every time I lit up a cigarette. Now, I have the belief that the 90-year-old who's still walking around smoking and they're like, F lung cancer doesn't exist. Like, those people probably live forever because their belief. But my belief was different. I know cigarettes cause lung cancer. I was afraid of it. And I know, you know what, if I keep going on this road, my fear is going to even exacerbate it. And I have to stop doing this to myself. The other thing was is I never wanted to date or be married to or hook up with a get together in a long-term partnership with someone who's a smoker. So here I am out of integrity trying to date and find what? Someone who I am not myself. So I had to come Jesus with myself on these things and did it, but I had to get there. You have to hit your rock bottom. How much better do you want this autoimmune situation to go?
Mm-hmm.
How much better, how quickly do you want to heal? Because the pill's not going to do it. No pill's going to do it. And the pills are going to work better and more efficiently the more efficient and clean you are. And you'll need less of them, no matter what those pills are.
What's really interesting is about how we don't realize how addictive and how sugar is a drug. If you can think back to any of your friends who used to be alcoholics, you will see that they're clearly addicted to sugar now. When I
Of
was
course.
19, my ex-boyfriend's stepdad, he's such a nice guy, super nice guy. We'd come over to visit his house, and there would be any 12 months of the year, at all times, 3 bowls of Halloween candy around his chair, like his recliner. And he was in his 40s, but he'd sit, watch racing or some sports, there'd be 3 bowls, giant bowls, like you could bear your hand in it, bowls of Halloween candy at all times within his reach. And I always kind of thought that was odd. But he was an alcoholic for many years, and he did a quit overnight when he realized he was driving his entire family, down a cliff, metaphorically, and he was losing everything. He finally had a aha moment when his family was about to leave him and he was going to be homeless and jobless. He was like, oh, well, maybe I should stop drinking. But the next day he turned to, because his body was literally addicted to alcohol, and the only way he survived was eating copious amounts of candy for years. He was highly addicted to sugar. And that, when I was 19 and I saw that, I was like, whoa, wait a second. Alcohol and a candy bar are the exact same thing to your body. Once your body's done processing it, your liver goes, sugar is sugar is sugar, whether it's alcohol or whether it's a Mars bar, or whether it's your pasta or whether it's your latte. It's all sugar to the body, and so they're just trading out alcohol. They're trading out the addiction is still there, even though now they're still sober. But how sober are you if you're living off of the highs and lows of sugar? It is completely controlling your mental and emotional state, giving you brain fog and mood swings. My husband and I,
You're
every
more likely
fight.
to go back to drinking if you had quit and then you got onto sugar.
Oh,
You have more
right.
risk of getting back to alcohol. And on that note of, who else is often addicted to sugar are like athletes that have not
Mm,
playing anymore. Because think about it. And like the LA Lakers went primal and paleo. They got rid of all their Gatorade and all their BS. They aligned each refrigerator from like sugar, lowest in sugar to highest, so that every athlete who opened the thing could see, it'd be like water, then a kombucha, then you know what I mean? And the thing is that that makes a lot of sense. And with addicts, they would say like, oh, keep sugar or chocolate next to your bed at night. Oh my God, what a horrible way to live. How about get off of being sugar dependent immediately?
mm-hmm.
Like as soon as you can. In fact, if I were an alcoholic and had quit alcohol intentionally, I would be like, I need to become a fat burning like immediately. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every fight my husband and I ever had in the last 9 years, we were able to, once the light bulb went on, one day we were fighting and my husband's acting so unlike himself, and it was like Jekyll and Hyde, and I turned to him and the light bulb went off, and I said, "What did you eat today?" And we figured, like, what did you eat last night? What did you eat today? And he was never diagnosed with diabetes. And at that point in time, I was just getting over diabetes. I was just figuring out how to dial in my diet. So I was more sensitive to like, oh, this is what it feels like to have normal blood sugar. This is what it feels like to not. And I turned to him and I'm like, I'm going to make you some scrambled eggs. Like we were having a wicked fight. Go eat some scrambled eggs. Let's continue this fight or discussion in 20 minutes. He went, oh my gosh, you're right. And he goes, I can't control it. That like the Jekyll comes out and I want to just like pick at you and fight with you, and I can't control it when I'm in that weird blood sugar, low blood sugar, high blood sugar, whatever the swings. He goes, it just takes over. It takes over my thinking. And it's like being bipolar. It's just the ups and the downs. And after we both went sugar free and, took the right supplements, ate the right foods, basically what you're describing, he goes, I feel so even keel. First time in my life, I feel even keel. And I never knew what that felt like. And just emotionally, mentally, totally stable, totally even keel. So I imagine if 1/3 of the population of the United States is diabetic or pre-diabetic, then at least 1/3 of the United States feels those ups and those downs, like their body is controlling them, that they don't have
You shouldn't be
control.
feeling them because they shouldn't be there.
Exactly. That the
They really shouldn't
hangry.
be there. Yeah, they
Yeah.
really shouldn't. And once you get the hang of this and you go down this road, uh, it's never there. I mean, it might be there if we went like a couple weeks without food, sure. I mean, but it really isn't there. And that's the most amazing thing about it is you don't get into that, and it takes a long time. Once you're really in it, you'd have to be really off the rails for a while before you'd feel that way again. But it'd be so quick that you'd feel like crap. You probably wouldn't be able to manage past a few days of eating like that because you would go, "Oh my God, what did I do?" Hopefully, and turn it around.
Mm.
Whereas before, when you're constantly in that, like not feeling so great anyway, and you get into those things often because you're a sugar addict, then it's just par for the course and you're used to it. But it's almost like you kind of can't go back. Once you've
Yeah.
experienced this way of being, then and look, it's not that I was there over the holidays with my brother. We were like, oh, let's get some pies and we'll just do it up. Eat like crap and just, have some fun. And so again, it was like in the middle of the day, we'd already eaten some real food and we each had a piece of pie. And then literally both of us within like 30 minutes, we both passed out on his couches in his living room for 2 hours. Complete coma, because both of us are fat adapted, we're primal, and it was like that idea of like, oh yeah, you know what, it's Thanksgiving or it's Christmas, but even then, so it ends up not being worth it. Like you don't want to do it again the next day, is all I'm saying, because that state's not normal anymore, and it feels awful to be out of
Mm-hmm.
control, and you just can't even keep your eyelids open. You just can't. You can't.
You shared
Um,
that you're detoxifying from mercury.
yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, there's several ways to do it. It depends on how severe the levels are and how aggressive the person wants to be. But the functional doctor on my book, Dr. Gary Forsman, we're using a product called, well, I aggressively used, sauna and steam regularly. So I was doing that. And there's a product called Pecticlear, and it's more of a natural agent that you take over months that it's made from seaweed and it kind of draws out the impurities along with taking sort of a liver detox kind of supplement that has some things in it, uh, including, even probably a little selenium and NAC and probably some other stuff, but there's milk thistle and dandelion and some things to help the liver detoxify as well. And then also just being as clean as I can and not eating sushi and non-wild fish and limiting fish in general, just because let's just be extra careful. But if I do, I try to do wild fish. That was the biggest bummer for me because I love sashimi and sushi and I could eat it all the time. And so likely that's what got me there. um, so yeah, so we'll see. Oh, also though, I didn't realize because many years ago, when my mother found out it was a bad thing to have metal fillings in your mouth, we got all of our fillings
Mm.
replaced. However, I didn't realize I had one big metal filling on my back, one of my back upper teeth. And my doctor had said to me, he goes, you have to get that removed. And so I did. I got it removed about a month ago. And I just had no idea. So every time I was chewing, I was releasing mercury vapor into my mouth on top of already having high levels. So that is one way you got to do it. You really can't probably detox from mercury, especially in heavy metals, if you have that kind of metal in your mouth, the amalgam fillings. So getting those replaced is an important part of any health journey, to be honest.
Absolutely. Elle, it has been fantastic having you on the show. This is so enlightening and so motivating, not only for those who can heal their thyroid, yes, you can, but for those who have so many other issues. You don't even have to have a diagnosis of anything. If you feel like crap, try this diet and give it at least a month. I hate it when I get on a diet and I don't feel good within like a week or 2 weeks and I get off of it. I'm like, I really, you have to, especially if you're helping your body detox and adapt to going from, burning sugar to using fat as fuel. it does take time to help the body become adapted. And so we got to just drink lots of water, eat all the healthy foods, make sure you're getting enough vegetables. I think a lot of people tend to not get enough vegetables and vegetables are great to sop up all the fat, right? You can cover it
There
in
you go.
butter or MCT
You
oil.
need a butter vehicle.
Yeah, but thank you. Yes, you need the fat vehicle. So like just eat more vegetables. Anytime I don't feel like I did Atkins several times, and anytime I didn't feel good on it, I really realized that I just wasn't getting enough vegetables because vegetables help to carry the toxins out of our body. All that healthy fiber is going to help to carry those toxins out and move stuff along. So, um, what you're doing is wonderful. The Paleo Thyroid Solution, like I said, the links to everything Elle Russ does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast. Go check out her website and her book. That list you said, do they get on your email list to get that list from you, or do they just email
No, they
you?
could just contact me through the contact form on my website and just be
Great.
like, "Hi, give me that list you talked about on the podcast." It could just be that simple. And I'll send it to you. And what it entails is, well, it's a way if you wanted a free consult with me, 15 minutes for thyroid, if someone needed that, just like, here's that information. But it's also, here's how to find the doctor. Here are the free groups to save money, to, communicate with patients. Here's the books you need. Here are the tests. I laid out everything in there so that people can just start right away. You don't have to go order my book to know what tests to get and kind of what to do. So it's a good little roadmap for everybody.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Elle. This has been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy what you heard today on your episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Did something move you, inspire you? Did you get great information that's going to change your life? Awesome. That's exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you gain your health back. Please turn around and share this. If this is something that's helped you in any way, share this with those you love. Love the Learn True Health podcast and want to support us? Awesome. You can go to takeyoursupplements.com and you can support us that way. You'll get access to amazing supplements that are just really great quality for a great price. And there'll be someone on the other end of the line to help you pick out your supplements that are right for you. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Or join our membership, learntruehealth.com/join. That's another great way to support our podcast, support our movement, and you'll be supporting yourself. Gain more information, wonderful videos, wonderful trainings, and you'll also be able to share those with those you love as well. So go to learntruehealth.com/join. Want something fun for free? Go to learntruehealth.com, and right there on the front page, you'll see where you can get our free cookbook. I spent a lot of time making it, and it was so much fun. It's really delicious, healthy recipes. And you can also get our 7-day doctor course. Right there, it's 7 days of naturopathic videos sent right to your inbox, and you can learn from top naturopaths on how to gain health naturally. So that's takeyoursupplements.com for wonderful supplements. learntruehealth.com/join to join our awesome membership, which is only open for a limited time. You can get our free healthy cookbook, and you can also get for free 7 days of wonderful naturopathic videos sent to you. Just go to learntruehealth.com and you'll see it right there on the front page. Thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you for sharing and helping others. Let's spread this information and turn this ripple into a tidal wave.